Hi, I'm Robert Orm, and I'll be reading you today's edition of the Fall River Herald, dated Monday, January 26th, 2026. Fall River area in line for $6.3 million. By Margie Cullen. Massachusetts could receive nearly $93 million in federal funding, and some of it could be headed to the Fall River area. On January 15th, the U.S. Senate passed a trio of bills to provide funding for an array of projects across the government. The bills include $92.78 million in federal funding for Massachusetts, split across 93 projects in areas like infrastructure, energy, and science. Includes $1.5 million for Worcester Polytechnic Institute to build a device to destroy PFAS. $1 million for the Hyannis Public Library Association, and $1,031,000 to reduce flooding and prevent pollution at affordable housing developments in Boston. The entire Massachusetts federal delegation applauded the funds in a press release. I'm proud to have worked with the entire Massachusetts delegation to secure over $92 million in funding this year for projects that will make our water cleaner, our environment healthier, our workforce stronger, and expand justice in our communities, said Senator Ed Markey, Massachusetts. From Princetown to Williamstown, from Chelsea to Chicopee, it's critical that we bring federal resources to our communities to make life better for everyone who calls the Bay State home. The funding package was previously passed by the House on January 8th, and it will next head to President Donald Trump's desk to be signed into law. The legislation, if passed, will also avert another government shutdown. How much government money would be coming to the Fall River area? $2,026,000 for Fall River to implement a phosphorus deactivation program at the South Watuppa Pond. $1,092,000 for Swansea for Route 6 corridor sewer collection system. $1,092,000 for Fall River to replace lead-contaminated service lines and pipes. $1 million for Freetown to meet the newest drinking water standards and protect communities from exposure to harmful PFAS. $1,092,000 for Westport to construct trunk sewer phases to provide sewer service and clean water to adjacent residential neighborhoods. Other projects that would affect nearby communities include $1,031,000 for a new harbor safety police vessel for the Port of New Bedford, $1,092,000 for improvements to a Wareham water pollution control facility, and $350,000 for improvements to Dighton's power plant pump station. Emeril Lagasse to close restaurant, by Lourdes C. De Silva. Fall River-born celebrity chef Emeril Lagasse is shutting down his Portuguese cuisine-inspired restaurant in New Orleans on January 31st. 34 Restaurant, a collaboration with his son E.J. Lagasse, opened its doors in October 2024 with the aim of serving Portuguese traditional dishes with a modern twist. This past year has been a true labor of love for chefs Emeril and E.J. Lagasse, and an opportunity to share their Portuguese heritage, family recipes, and culture with New Orleans, according to a January 22nd post on the restaurant's Instagram page. While rising operational costs have led us to make this difficult decision, we are incredibly grateful for the journey. Despite the closure, they said they remain proud of what 34 Restaurant represented and the memories created inside its walls. We're all proud of what was accomplished, from Michelin recognition and Wine Spectator's Award of Excellence to introducing so many guests to Portuguese cuisine for the first time, according to the post. This isn't the last Caldo Verde we'll be sharing with the New Orleans community, and we look forward to what's to come, Lagasse previously stated that 34 Restaurant was a love letter to his family's roots. In an interview with the Herald News during one of his trips to the South Coast, the James Beard Award and Emmy-winning chef acknowledged the soon-to-be-closed restaurant was a tribute to his late mom Hilda, an Azorean immigrant, and to the Portuguese culture and people. I grew up eating that sort of food and experiencing that kind of culture, so a lot of my influences in my cooking is not only my mom, but where I grew up, he told the Herald News. Lagasse grew up in Fall River's South End and had what he described as a very Portuguese childhood. He started playing in the St. Anthony's Band as a percussionist at a very young age, and as a result attended countless Portuguese festas. As he grew older, he held various part-time jobs at local establishments, including a popular Portuguese bakery and the St. John's Athletic Club. I started very young in a Portuguese bakery, Moonlight Baking Corporation, now Barcelos Bakery, on Bedford Street, washing pots and pans there when I was 11, he recalled in the Herald News interview. He attended the Diamond Regional Vocational Technical High School's Culinary Arts program and went on to pursue his dream of becoming a chef at Johnson & Wales University after turning down a scholarship to the New England Conservatory of Music. Before venturing outside of this area, he worked at various Fall River area establishments, such as the Keketchun Club and the Venus de Milo in Swansea, and held various jobs in Rhode Island. In 1990, he opened his flagship, Emeril's Restaurant, in the Warehouse District of New Orleans, paving his way to a restaurant empire and a successful cooking show career, appearing on a wide variety of cooking television shows, including the long-running Food Network shows Emeril Live and Essence of Emeril. Swansea's administrator highlights town wins ahead of her departure. By Emily Sherney. After 5 years of dedicated service to the town as its administrator, Mallory Ehrenstein's tenure began during the pandemic era, when municipal departments were more siloed than usual. Since then, Ehrenstein said she's very proud of the service here in Swansea. She confirmed her appointment as town manager in Mansfield on January 9th and is preparing to make the transition in the months to come. Faced with her upcoming departure from Swansea, she spoke of capital improvements projects, economic development, and departmental restructuring that occurred in her time spent serving Swansea. State and local partnering allowed Swansea to gain a new public library that was built ahead of schedule and under budget, Ehrenstein said, calling it a case study, exemplar of a moment where Swansea was able to leverage a state grant and forego borrowing. Ehrenstein pointed to the Swansea Sewer Project and a newly installed and monitored pollinator garden at the Medeiros Farm Recreational Complex, 1100 Bark Street, that pays homage to Swansea's agrarian roots, as quintessential of the success the town has achieved under her leadership. Ehrenstein said the town's website has been built up in the name of engagement and transparency since her arrival. Recreational parks have proliferated. We fortified our relationship with state delegates, said Ehrenstein. We formalized our policies here, reinforcing a human resources department, she said. Now we have a full employee manual. With a firmer hiring process in place, Ehrenstein said the town has been successful in vetting and finding talent that has proved useful in supporting day-to-day operations at Town Hall. In a town with a 3-person board of selectmen, as opposed to Mansfield's 5-member select board, Ehrenstein spoke of the complexities related to establishing long-term goals that often span decades for capital projects or fiscal health, when annual elections compound changes in direction when 2-year selectman terms are up. Ehrenstein shared that town managers are often thought of as a town's executive leader, with increased oversight when it comes to departmental priorities and long-term objectives. Unlike an administrative chief, town managers can compress redundant processes as the wheel of municipal government turns, accomplishing more in less time. Appointments of officials fall under the capability of the town manager to carry out. In some cases, boards and commissions have to do the work that you're charged with, Ehrenstein said. I'm hoping it makes for smoother government. The authority and reach of the position is a key difference, Ehrenstein said. Ehrenstein said Mansfield is a larger municipality than Swansea and has a ton of economic development, but could use some adjustments in the realm of finance. Mansfield has an airport and electrical utility complexities that, to Ehrenstein, pose a fresh intellectual challenge. Over the last 5 years, Ehrenstein has served as the sculptor of Swansea's blank canvas, and she said she hopes to bring the spirit of team building and collaboration to Mansfield. She recounted her experiences in that we've just been able to do a lot of great things, and expressed gratitude to a team that has used creativity to problem solve at every turn. It's a little bittersweet, she said of her upcoming departure from Swansea. Thank you to everybody here who has really taken me in, she said, acknowledging a great team and great people. We did great things together, she added, her voice filled with emotion. Ehrenstein said she will continue in her current position through February and anticipates that the Swansea Board of Selectmen will appoint an interim to caretake the position. Diocese of Fall River spotlights Faith First Learning Aid for K-8 families. By Beth McDermott. Catholic Schools Week returns for its 51st year, with the theme Catholic Schools United in Faith and Community expected to take center stage across the Diocese of Fall River's 17 schools. The annual celebration, which runs January 25th through 31st, is expected to include open houses, masses, tours, and other events designed to showcase the unique offerings of Catholic education, according to a community announcement. Catholic Schools Week is an annual celebration of Catholic education in the United States. It typically takes place during the last week of January and is marked by various activities and events in Catholic schools across the country. One of the goals of Catholic Schools Week is to highlight what makes Catholic schools different from public, charter, or other private schools. Pope Leo XIV, in a recent apostolic letter, emphasized that Catholic schools are environments where faith, culture, and life intertwine. While other school systems can only offer academics and skills, it is the goal of Catholic schools to educate for eternity by opening the minds, transforming the hearts, and igniting the souls of students in order to cultivate each person's desire to become the person God created them to be, the announcement stated. Daniel Roy, a superintendent of Diocese of Fall River Catholic Schools, said each of the diocese's elementary schools has launched a video showcasing how they embrace children as created in the image and likeness of God. The videos, which feature interviews with parents, students, teachers, principals, and pastors, are available at rediscovercatholicschools.org. Affordability is a common concern for families considering Catholic education. Christina Duggan, Vice President of Operations for the Catholic Foundation of Southeastern Massachusetts, said families with children in kindergarten through 8th grade are encouraged to apply for scholarships through the Foundation to advance Catholic education. For the current school year, nearly 1,000 students have received needs-based awards ranging from $250 to $2,750 per student, which can cover up to 50% of tuition, depending on the school. FACE scholarships can result in monthly tuition payments of $300 or less. Applications must be completed by March 31, 2026, for the best chance of receiving an award. Marion DeRochers, Director of Catholic Identity and Mission, emphasized the importance of faith in Catholic education. Our faith tells us that each student is made in the image and likeness of God, and we are just so blessed to bring students, teachers, staff, and families together on the holy ground of each Catholic school classroom, hallway, or gymnasium, DeRochers said. And in doing this, every day and throughout each day, they will begin to learn the necessity of prayer. Derek Borges, a parent of a student at Holy Name School in Fall River, said the school's environment helps children become the people God created them to be. From the morning prayer to those little moments with their prayer partners, to just recess moments, showing good sportsmanship and humility, and just how to be a good person and live in God's eyes, Borges said. For more details about Catholic school open houses during Catholic Schools Week, visit www.catholicschools.org/2026-open-houses. To view all 14 videos, visit www.rediscovercatholicschools.org/educating-for-eternity. Tech Workers Speak Out on ICE Surge by Jessica Gain. I'm really sick of ICE. How about you? Ann E. Dimer, a San Francisco human resources consultant, posted on LinkedIn, referring to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. A week later, more than 300 tech workers had signed a public petition she drafted, urging their employers, some of the world's most powerful companies, from Amazon to Google, to use their economic and political clout to press President Donald Trump to stop the aggressive immigration enforcement that resulted in the fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good, an unarmed mother of 3 in Minneapolis. For months now, Trump has sent federal agents to our cities to criminalize us, our neighbors, friends, colleagues, and family members, the petition reads. From Minneapolis to Los Angeles to Chicago, we've seen armed and masked thugs bring reckless violence, kidnapping, terror, and cruelty with no end in sight. This cannot continue, and we know the tech industry can make a difference. We want our CEOs to be calling the White House and saying that ICE needs to get out. Deemer, who used to work at tech company Stripe, told USA Today. She pointed to the role Salesforce's Mark Benioff and NVIDIA's Jensen Huang played in persuading the White House not to dispatch National Guard troops to her city in November. It worked in San Francisco, Deemer said. I would really love for it to work in Minnesota right now. The public condemnation of ICE tactics is among the first stirrings of resistance inside tech companies where employee activism used to run strong. After the fatal shooting of Good, early Google employee Jeff Dean, now chief scientist at DeepMind and Google Research, wrote on X, "This is completely not okay, and we can't become numb to repeated instances of illegal and unconstitutional action by government agencies. The recent days have been horrific." Nikhil Thorat, an engineer at Anthropic, said on X that Good's killing had stirred something in him. A mother was gunned down in the street by ICE, and the government doesn't even have the decency to perform a scripted condolence, he wrote. For years, cubicle activists hailing from liberal-skewing tech centers agitated for change around the globe and inside their own companies, pressuring their employers over contracts with U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the Pentagon, and over their lack of progress on climate change and workforce diversity, even over Google's handling of sexual harassment claims. During Trump's first term, legions of tech workers volunteered their time and skills, raised funds, and even walked off the job to protest his policies, and their bosses listened. Google co-founder Sergey Brin showed up at a demonstration against the travel ban for Muslim nations during Trump's first term, and Google CEO Sundar Pichai joined thousands of employees during a walkout. However, even before the changing of the guard in the White House, technology companies leery of political blowback in an increasingly polarized environment began steering clear of divisive issues such as immigration, racial justice, and LGBTQ+ issues. And they've expected their employees to do the same. With the rightward tilt in Silicon Valley, tech employees have kept largely quiet as some of the industry's most powerful leaders lobby the administration and present Trump with lavish gifts, while slashing policies and programs like diversity, equity, and inclusion that the administration has sought to eliminate. The tighter job market in tech has played a pivotal role in that silence, as have the limited legal rights of at-will employees who are not protected by the First Amendment guarantee of free speech, and who have been told by their employers to leave their politics at the door. The issue came to a head when tensions over the war in Gaza spilled into the workplace. In April 2024, Google employees held sit-ins at the company's offices in New York and Sunnyvale, California, to protest a $1.2 billion contract to provide the Israeli government with cloud computing and artificial intelligence services. The tech giant called the police. Then it fired some of the employees. Companies are being a little more sensitive about topics the administration is sensitive about, canceling the DEI programs and whatnot, and I think that has made folks afraid to speak out, Deemer said. They don't want to be in the next round of layoffs. They need their health insurance, and I get that. But I do think there are a lot of people who don't agree with tech's alignment with the administration, and especially with the violence that ICE is perpetuating. And so I think that's going to make more people speak up, especially when they see how many people are already speaking up. In condemning ICE tactics, these workers know they are taking professional and personal risks. Some signed the petition only to ask to have their names removed out of fear for their family's safety, Deemer said. Galen Panger, 40, a user experience researcher at YouTube, said he's not an employee agitator, but he felt compelled to speak out despite the risks. Immigration enforcement is really important, but there's right ways and wrong ways to go about it, he said. We just can't terrorize our citizens, murder our citizens on the street. Renee Good could have been my mom, and tomorrow Minneapolis-St. Paul could be San Francisco and the peninsula. What this letter is asking for that I signed is for these really big and important companies to do a little more, Panger added. They don't have to go out and poke the bear. They don't have to go out and do things that are irresponsible. But they can use their access, they can use their economic might to do a little more and say, let's stop terrorizing our citizens. With employees taking a stand, Deemer said she's hopeful the petition is the start of a new wave of employee activism in Silicon Valley. I'm so grateful for the folks who are taking the risk and putting their names out there, she said. I thought this was going to be like a quick Google form type thing, and it seems like it can maybe be more than that, and we can grow into something, and that would be really cool. Meta is set to lay off hundreds of workers, by No Padilla. As Meta continues to shift its business model away from developing the metaverse and toward building an artificial intelligence platform, the company confirmed plans to lay off hundreds of workers in California and Washington state. A majority of the workers laid off in the recent Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification filing, also known as a WARN notice, are from the company's Reality Labs division. This information backs up a report from the New York Times, which said the company was planning to lay off about 1,500 workers, or about 10% of its Reality Labs division. California's WARN notice revealed that the company intended to permanently lay off 272 employees by March 20th. The company will specifically cut ties with 53 employees at its Playa Vista location in Los Angeles County and 219 employees at its Burlingame location in San Mateo County. Beyond California, Meta filed a WARN notice in Washington, revealing that it would lay off 331 employees across the state. According to the notice, employees are expected to receive their benefits and pay until the day they separate from the company. The notice did not include information about any potential severance packages being offered by the company. The affected positions ranged from game developers, data engineers, software engineers, AI researchers, and more across several of the company's departments for the Metaverse Content Group, Horizon OS, and Reality Labs Group, to name a few. USA Today reached out to Meta for comment regarding the layoffs but did not receive a response by the time of publication. In 2021, CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced that his company would be changing its name from Facebook to Meta to reflect its growing focus on the metaverse. As part of the company's transition, it invested heavily in Reality Labs, formerly known as Oculus VR, to support the research and development of virtual and augmented reality and software. Meta initially invested $10 billion to fund its research into new technologies. However, the company's 2024 fourth quarter earnings revealed that Meta had lost more than $60 billion in operating costs. Our outlook reflects an expectation for continued strong ad revenue growth, partially offset by lower year-over-year Reality Labs revenue in the fourth quarter, the company's 2025 third quarter report said. Meta will announce its 2025 fourth quarter earnings on January 28th and continue its focus on developing the company's AI capabilities. We are at an exciting point for our company, where we have continued runway to improve our core services today, as well as the opportunity to build new AI-powered experiences and services that will transform how people engage with our products in the future, Meta said in its 2025 third quarter report. Next year will enable us to continue to deliver strong revenue growth in 2026, while our progress on AI models and products will position us to capitalize on new revenue opportunities in the years to come. We've reached the halfway point of our program, and regular listeners are aware that at this stage of our broadcast, we move to the obituaries. Roseanne Aruda Keating was welcomed into the loving arms of God and her parents in heaven on January 21st, 2026. Roseanne was born on September 5th, 1950 in the Flint area of Fall River, Massachusetts, to Lois and Angelina Leet Aruda. Roseanne is survived by her husband of 54 years, Stephen J. Keating of Lunenburg, Massachusetts, a sister, Teresa Aruda Tanner, and her husband, Carl, of Oakley, California. She leaves her two children, Melissa Keating Roan, and her son-in-law, Bert Roan, of Greenup, Kentucky. A visitation will be held on Wednesday morning, January 28th, at St. Boniface Church, 817 Massachusetts Avenue, Lunenburg at 10 a.m., followed by the celebration of a funeral mass at 11 a.m. A private burial will take place in St. Bernard's Cemetery, Fitchburg, Massachusetts, in the spring. A reception will take place immediately following the funeral service at Slattery's Restaurant on Lunenburg Street in Fitchburg. All are welcome to attend. In lieu of flowers, please consider sending a contribution to Lunenburg Turkey Hill Family Lions Club Food Bank, P.O. Box 316, Lunenburg, Massachusetts, 01462. Is ICE Violating the Fourth Amendment? By Christopher Can. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is facing scrutiny over its assertion that federal officers can forcibly enter a home without a judicial warrant, a move constitutional scholars, immigration experts, and a federal judge say is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. An internal ICE memo from May 12, 2025, directs agents to use force to enter residences after obtaining administrative warrants, which are signed by ICE authorities and do not require a judge's approval, according to a whistleblower complaint reviewed by USA Today and first reported by the Associated Press. The memo appeared to upend long-standing precedent and law enforcement policy, including at the Department of Homeland Security, which relied on warrants signed by impartial members of the judicial branch to enter homes or businesses for searches and arrests. News of the memo comes amid the Trump administration's expanding deportation campaign that's seen aggressive enforcement operations nationwide and a hiring blitz that more than doubled its workforce. It remains unclear how often the new policy has been used in field operations. On January 18th, federal agents with guns drawn broke down the front door of the home of Chong Lai Thao, a naturalized U.S. citizen. Relatives and local officials said he was temporarily detained and never shown a warrant. Images of Thao being led shirtless outside in the snow prompted outrage and calls for a formal investigation. ICE officials and other federal authorities have downplayed constitutional concerns and said the agency is acting in accordance with the law. Marcos Charles, the Executive Associate Director of ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations, said on January 22nd that agents can enter homes with only administrative warrants. "We don't break into anybody's homes," Charles said. "We make entry either in a hot pursuit with a criminal arrest warrant or an administrative arrest warrant. The thing to remember is these administrative arrest warrants have been deemed justified by courts in immigration purposes." Fourth Amendment scholars and immigration law experts said the ICE memo flies in the face of the U.S. Constitution. In 2024, a federal judge in California reached the same conclusion, banning ICE from entering homes without a judge's warrant and declaring such actions violate the Fourth Amendment. "This is essentially authorizing a violation of fundamental rights we've had as Americans since the Bill of Rights was passed," said Rick Simmons, a law professor at Ohio State University. "It goes against 250 years of case law on what the Fourth Amendment allows." The May 2025 memo says ICE agents can use a Form I-205 to enter a residence without consent. A Form I-205, which authorizes the arrest of immigrants with final deportation orders, are not reviewed by a judge. The forms are instead signed by an ICE official, potentially the agent conducting the arrest. A judicial warrant, on the other hand, is approved by an impartial judge outside the executive branch who must weigh evidence before allowing the government to forcibly enter a home. Lindsay Nash, a professor at Yeshiva University's Cardozo School of Law, said it's dangerous to conflate judicial warrants with administrative warrants. These forms, filled out by ICE officers, potentially even the arresting officer, are really a far cry from the judicial warrants required for entry into a home, she said. Nash said the federal government faces an uphill battle if it attempts to prove the memo is constitutional. ICE has repeatedly recognized in its own manuals that administrative warrants don't authorize it to forcibly enter a home, she said. ICE doesn't have that kind of authority, so this will be very hard to justify in court. The Supreme Court has allowed very few exceptions to allow law enforcement to enter a home without a judge's warrant or consent. Those mainly include emergencies, such as an imminent risk to officers or civilians in the area, or risk of immediate loss of evidence. Simmons said there's also a special needs doctrine suggesting that if the government is not conducting a search for criminal law purposes, then it's not subject to all of the requirements of the Fourth Amendment. But the Supreme Court repeatedly limited entries into homes to emergencies, such as when authorities believe someone is seriously injured or is at risk of serious injury, including suicide. There's no emergency for ICE, Simmons said. They're not claiming it's an emergency. It's a civil law violation. I don't see a way they can do that legally. The memo, according to a copy shared publicly by Senator Richard Blumenthal, Connecticut, makes a clear exception to the new policy for the Central District of California, where a federal judge in 2024 ruled that ICE agents needed judicial approval to force their way into a residence. The order by U.S. District Court Judge Otis D. Wright says the court vacates any policies or practices allowing ICE agents to enter a home to arrest someone absent a search warrant. That's the only time a court has taken up this specific issue, Simmons said. The directive was not widely shared in the agency and instead was verbally communicated, including to new recruits, according to a disclosure received by members of Congress from Whistleblower Aid, a legal group representing 2 anonymous government officials. The May 12th memo has been provided to select DHS officials who are then directed to verbally brief the new policy for action, the disclosure said. Those supervisors then show the memo to some employees, like our clients, and direct them to read the memo and return it to the supervisor. The whistleblowers allege that newly hired ICE agents, many of whom do not have a law enforcement background, have been told to rely on the I-205 form to enter a home without consent to arrest undocumented immigrants. Potentially, scores of ICE agents will be emboldened to unlawfully enter private residences, which include the private residences of U.S. citizens, the disclosure states. Nash questioned why the ICE did not publicly announce the policy change described in the memo. That is not the behavior of an agency that believes what it is doing is lawful or would stand up in court, she said. Display on Enslaved People Removed by Feds, by Phaedra Treffin. A display steps from the Liberty Bell that commemorated the enslaved people who lived and worked at George Washington's house when he lived there as president, was dismantled on January 22nd, its signage and other materials removed by National Park Service personnel. The parcel at 6th and Market Streets is where Washington lived when Philadelphia was the U.S. capital. Records show that he kept enslaved people there. There is only one federal government site in the country where there's a documented history of enslaved black people, said Michael Cord, a lawyer and activist who had fought for acknowledgement of the 9 people who were kept at the home. USA Today reached out to the National Park Service and the U.S. Department of the Interior about the removal and received an emailed response pointing to an executive order signed by President Donald Trump in March entitled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. The President has directed federal agencies to review interpretive materials to ensure accuracy, honesty, and alignment with shared national values, the statement said. Following completion of the required review, the National Park Service is now taking action to remove or revise interpretive materials in accordance with the order. Cord said that while he wasn't surprised at the removal, which has been threatened for months, he wasn't sure why it happened now. Last year, Cord and other activists, preservationists, historians, and architects began formulating plans in case the administration acted on the executive order's September deadline. He wasn't at the site when workers began taking down displays, but Miguel Johnson, another member of his Avenging the Ancestors coalition, was. As workers loaded signs onto a truck, Johnson asked where they were taking them, but workers would only say that the signs would be taken to a secure location, according to Cord. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported January 22nd that Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle Parker's administration promptly sued based on a 2006 agreement between the federal government and the city that requires advance notice of any changes to the park property. According to the Inquirer, the suit names Interior Secretary Doug Burgum and Acting National Park Service Director Jessica Barron, and calls the removal of the displays about slavery unlawful, arbitrary, and capricious. Speaking late on January 22nd, Cord said he was aware that the city had filed suit and appreciated that it would devote resources to the cause. He worries what might become of the materials that were at the president's house. There's no way they should be destroyed, both because of their important information and because they're now potentially evidence in a lawsuit, Cord said. But with this administration, anything could happen. Tomorrow it could all be torn down. Still, Cord said, we are pursuing every legal option, and there is still a lot we can do. U.S. Virgin Islands Worries for Greenland by Carissa Waddock. Traces of Denmark's 250-year imperial reign are still visible on St. Thomas, St. Croix, St. John, and the smattering of tiny islets that today make up the U.S. Virgin Islands. Cities and street signs hold Danish names, like Frederiksted. Buildings feature yellowish-red bricks brought on boats across the Atlantic, and the stone facades of sugar plantations where enslaved Africans were forced to work still stand. They're interspersed with evidence of the island's vibrant Caribbean culture, from costumed dancers to drum-driven melodies, and the McDonald's and Home Depot stores that reflect its now century-long status as an unincorporated territory of the United States. As President Donald Trump negotiates a framework of a future deal with Denmark for access to Greenland, some residents of the tropical territory say they feel like they're rewatching their own past. History never repeats itself in the same way, but it shows up in a different form, said Stephanie Chalana Brown, an Afro-Caribbean visual historian with deep roots in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Brown said her ancestors were among the first enslaved by Danish colonial powers, and she is now working to secure reparations from Denmark. As slaves, then as residents of the Danish-turned U.S. territory, Brown said her relatives were sold without their consent. A century later, she worries residents of Greenland are facing the same threat her ancestors did, of not having a seat at the table over decisions on the future use of their lands. I understand it because the same thing happened to my relatives, Brown said. I don't want to see it happen to another place. More than a century ago, President Woodrow Wilson bought the islands, then called the Danish West Indies, from Denmark for $25 million after threatening to take them by force. At the time, a war was raging in war was raging in Europe, and the United States was seeking to assert its dominance in Latin America. Using many of the same arguments Trump has in jockeying for control of Greenland, Wilson said he wanted the islands for strategic reasons, to secure new trade routes and prevent adversaries from dominating the region. The nation's rival then wasn't China or Russia, but Germany, the aggressor in World War I. The war heightened fears that Germany would absorb Denmark and its territories, a perceived threat to the United States. After the 1917 purchase, the island served for decades as a strategic Caribbean outpost for the U.S. military and a hub for naval operations. But the Navy Air Station closed in 1948, and the islands never became the significant military asset once envisioned. The roughly 26,000 inhabitants scattered across St. John, St. Croix, and St. Thomas in 1917 were not given a say in the acquisition, though Denmark did hold a referendum for its mainland residents. After the transaction, it took more than a decade for Virgin Islanders to gain U.S. citizenship. Islanders were given the right to vote for their own governor in 1970. Today, like residents of other U.S. territories, citizens in the Virgin Islands cannot vote for president and do not have a voting representative in Congress. Philippe Ayala, a member of the St. Thomas Historical Trust, said he's heard conversations about Trump's Greenland desires, but mostly in private circles. People, he said, are more focused on the international actions happening right in their backyard. Two Navy aircraft carriers, the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Iwo Jima, docked in the U.S. Virgin Islands in December 2025 to aid in the Trump administration's efforts to disrupt drug trafficking and later to capture Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro. The ships marked the first major Navy presence on the island in decades. Some residents welcomed the ships, and the sailors they brought, as a welcome economic boost for the island, Ayala said. Others were frightened. When we step off our porches, most of the houses overlook the harbor and the bay, he said. To see aircraft carriers, and knowing the political climate of the region, it took us a little off guard. In the aftermath of his military actions in Venezuela, Trump ratcheted up calls to annex Greenland and refused to rule out doing so through military force. Trump on January 23rd appeared to walk back some of that rhetoric, saying that the United States would have total access to the Arctic island through a deal he was negotiating. He conceded that he may not end up formally acquiring Greenland. Anything's possible. It's possible, Trump said of U.S. ownership. The details of the emerging agreement remain murky. So does the role Greenland's own legislature is playing in the discussions. For Brown and other Virgin Islanders with ancestry tied to Danish colonialism, the recent discussions over Greenland's future have spurred heightened empathy and concern for the 57,000 inhabitants of the 836,000 square mile island with a climate much different from their own. Is he bringing them to the table to talk about policies? She asked of Trump's plans for America's military footprint on the island. Those things weren't extended to Virgin Islanders. Most Greenlanders are Inuit, an indigenous people who also live in Alaska and Canada. Greenlandic, the language they speak, is vastly different from Danish, and their traditions are distinct from those found in Denmark, Western Europe, and America. If the United States builds up its military presence on Greenland, Brown also said she's worried the island could experience some of the same Americanization she said is happening in the Virgin Islands. You see the washing of our children's identity away, where you know they're learning about American culture from the influence of things like television and radio, she said. We are losing our own Caribbean identity. I hope that doesn't happen to them as well. EU sees clean energy surpass fossil fuels, by Jesus Calero and Laura Contamori. Wind and solar power for the first time generated more electricity in the European Union than fossil fuels in 2025, driven by a surge in solar output, data from energy think tank Ember showed on January 22nd. Wind and solar made up a record 30% of the 27-country bloc's power last year, overtaking fossil fuels that contributed 29%. Solar alone was responsible for 13% of power generation and expanded by more than 20% for the fourth year running, surpassing both coal and hydro. As fossil fuel dependencies feed instability on the global stage, the stakes of transitioning to clean energy are clearer than ever, Beatrice Petrovich, senior energy analyst at Ember and lead author of the report, said. Solar generation grew in all EU countries amid widespread solar panel installations and supplied more than a fifth of electricity in Hungary, Cyprus, Greece, Spain, and the Netherlands in 2025. Renewable resources provided nearly half of the bloc's power mix at 48%, even as unusual weather pushed hydro output 12% lower and wind 2% lower. Despite this, wind contributed 17% of electricity in the EU, more than gas. Early 2025 was exceptionally sunny, marked by low wind speeds and low rainfall, but strong solar output helped keep the overall share of renewables stable, Petrovich told Reuters. 14 EU countries produced more electricity from wind and solar than from all fossil fuels, reinforcing a structural shift in the region's power system that includes phasing out coal. Coal power is in its terminal decline. We could say it's becoming history for the EU, Petrovich said in the interview. The fossil fuels' share in the power mix was at a record low of 9.2%. Gas generation in the EU rose 8% due to lower hydro availability, lifting gas import costs by 16% to $37 billion for the power sector, the first increase since the 2022 energy crisis. Increased gas usage also lifted average wholesale power prices, which were 11% higher during gas-heavy hours than in 2024. But rapid growth in battery storage, particularly in Germany, Italy, and Poland, could help shift solar and wind power to meet evening demand peaks and stabilize prices, Petrovich said. No, Signetti isn't retiring or leaving for NFL. The shocking news would come soon enough, but not yet. And not you, Kurt Signetti. Good question. The perpetually disgruntled Indiana University football coach blurted January 19th during his post-game news conference when he was asked. This was the first question after the Hoosiers' 27-21 victory against the University of Miami in the 2025 College Football Playoff National Championship game, how he would allow himself to enjoy this accomplishment. Because I'll be dealing with underclassmen going to the NFL tomorrow and who knows what else. And if I was smart, I'd probably retire. Then I'd really be a story. Don't do that, Sig. And no, he's not doing that. But we need the money, Signetti continued, laughing, his way of reassuring the fan base that he wasn't serious about retiring. And besides, what would I do? We'll be back at it. I love what I do. I love football. I'm a football guy. I don't have many other things that I do besides family. Like that, order was restored. Sleep well, Indiana fans. For 2 years, folks have been trying to understand what's so right about Signetti. Like, how is he this good? Get online, do what Signetti once suggested. Google me. And the search engine practically types the question for you, because everybody wants to know, What makes Curt Cignetti so good? A much simpler question to answer is, what is the worst thing about Cignetti? That one's easy. He's too old. Oh, stop it. You know what I mean. At 64, he's clearly approaching retirement age, and if you're an Indiana football fan, that's a little scary. Because what happens next? What happens to Indiana football after he retires? Because it's coming soon. Has to be. The guy turns 65 in June, before the 2026 college football season. That's retirement age. But now, the good news, in the form of comments Indiana offensive coordinator Mike Shanahan made at a news conference 2 days before the title game. Shanahan has been with Cignetti since 2016, following him from Indiana University of Pennsylvania to Elon to James Madison to Indiana, and surely knows him as well as anyone. A reporter asked Shanahan about Cignetti's love of the game, and Shanahan said, "He eats, sleeps, and breathes football." The reporter wanted to know something, anything, about Cignetti away from football. Music, for example. Does he have any favorites? "No," Shanahan said. "He's all ball." He came up with a brief exception. "I know there was one time he was watching Game of Thrones. That may have been when we were at Elon." Can he see Cignetti doing this for another 20 years? "I don't see how he could give it up," Shanahan said. "I know he loves football too much. He's such a competitor." In fact, "I wouldn't be shocked at all," Shanahan said, "if this thing went well beyond another 8, 9, 10, 15 years. Okay, so no retirement. But what about a move? Cignetti is a football lifer from western Pennsylvania, home of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers' job is open. Cignetti is the hottest coach in football at any level. Add 2 and 2 and you get the scariest 4 of your life. Until you realize Cignetti has already thrown water on that particular piece of arithmetic. He was asked January 17th about the NFL, specifically about jobs in Pennsylvania. "I mean, I'm not an NFL guy," Cignetti said. "I made that decision at NC State in 2000. I had a chance to go with the Packers." Cignetti was referencing the time Packers coach Mike Sherman offered him a job coaching quarterbacks. The Packers quarterback in 2000, Brett Favre. "Favre was in his heyday," Cignetti said. "I declined the opportunity. I almost took it. That's when I made the final decision, and I've always been more of a college football guy." Cignetti isn't going anywhere, which means Indiana football isn't going anywhere. Can't say the same for everybody, though. The Hoosiers, a 2-Mendoza team in 2025, apparently will have a 0 Mendoza balance in 2026. Heisman-winning quarterback Fernando Mendoza is the presumptive first overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, and his younger brother Alberto, after telling reporters and even the coaching staff that he would return, has entered the transfer portal. That news broke within hours of the Hoosiers' win. Cignetti has been a quarterback kingmaker, helping each of his last 6 quarterbacks at James Madison and Indiana earn significant individual postseason hardware. Alberto Mendoza, the Hoosiers' backup quarterback as a redshirt freshman, seemed next after completing 18 of 24 passes for 286 yards, 5 touchdowns, and an interception. He ran 13 times for 190 yards, a whopping 14.6 yard average. And that's all I have time for. This is your reader, Robert Worm, saying thanks for listening.